in common? And the answer is very little, except a desire to tear down the Western system, the idea that the systems themselves are to blame for their problems, and so they put aside their own issues with each other to march together. And that coalition is the thing that frightens me and concerns me.
And that right there, I think, is the most honest, truthful, most respected thing I've heard him say my entire time watching him. People putting away their small differences and coming together to tear down structural systems, institutions that were made and maintained today to exploit people like you and me, that frightens him. Hey, thank you for clicking this video. Just to let you know, this is a clip from my previous live stream that I did. Just want to let you know I go live every Sunday through Thursday at 6:30 p.m. Mountain Time. And if you don't know what time that is, go ahead and Google that so you can meet me and have a conversation on my next stream. Once again, I appreciate you clicking this video. Now let's enjoy the video. I would reserve something like this for Monday, for a good Monday post to where, I know is going to get some views. But when I see Ben Shapiro, okay, yes, that guy with the squeaky voice, I think he's older than me. And his voice is higher than my 13-year-old son's voice, okay? He just hit puberty, and his voice is deeper than mine, okay? I got a deep voice too, okay? But anyway, when I see this dude talking with Stephen A. Smith, one of the most legendary grifters there is today, I knew it was going to be some BS. I just knew it. And I kid you not, I listened to the first maybe 8 minutes and I literally had to shut it off. And I was yelling at myself under my breath at work. Remind you, I'm at work where there's people around me and I'm yelling under my breath. Okay. I'm cussing and screaming and everything, because when you're dealing with someone like Ben Shapiro, he's not uninformed. He's not confused about some things. He knows the truth, but he's purposely taking a position that can easily be debunked with facts, with historical data. But he's purposely being this character because he's getting paid to do it. Like, Ben Shapiro's a smart guy, but when a smart person is playing dumb, that is probably the worst human being ever, because you're actively destroying this country just so you can get a couple of dollars. You see what I'm saying? So without further ado, let's go ahead, because I'm definitely going to be cutting in and out on this one. Because like literally every 30 seconds, he is saying the most ignorant things anyone can say. It's like he had to jam-pack this first 5 minutes with all the BS you can imagine. Trust me, it's that bad. So I'm sorry. Once again, this is political commentary, okay? This is my job. So let's hope I don't crash out here, okay?
Think about Western.
All right. Let's rewind. He has a new book out, so that's why he was on CNN. That's why he's on Stephen A. Smith. This is why we're starting to see him here.
And you see this politically. This is not a book.
Why that title, Ben?
So the basic idea is that human beings break down into two groups, lions and scavengers, but it really even goes beyond that. Inside each of us, we have a lion and we have a scavenger. The lion is the side of us that wants to build, that sees that institutions that are important need to be maintained, that wants to build social fabric, church, community, family, wants to go out and innovate and risk take and make our society stronger. And then there's the scavenger that's inside all of us that is envious of the people around us, envious of things other people have, and instead of channeling that towards something productive, want to tear down the entire system. And the fundamental thing that's important is that the system is to blame for my personal problems, my grievances, and therefore the system has to be absolutely destroyed.
So even just the basis of his book, like how like childish do you have to be someone like a Ben Shapiro, who's like a mainstream name for Republicans, come up with such a plain, lukewarm concept? The lions are the ones that go out there and provide, and the scavengers are the one who's envious and wants to blame all the world around them. Like, that's the best idea you could have came up with, really? So we already know where this is going. They want to tear down the structure, but the structure is actually really good. Like, oh, we're going down this road. Like, out of the million things that we could be talking about that actually have good, productive conversations, you want to talk about upholding these structures? Whew. All right, cool.
You see this politically. This is not a right-left split. One of the things that's kind of interesting about this book in particular is that it does not make a right-left sort of pure binary comparison. There can be lions on the left. There can be scavengers on the right. It really is about a grievance-oriented mentality that has set in civilizationally in parts of the West that wants to tear away the civilization and sees the civilization as fundamentally bad, that there needs to be a revolution that destroys rather than seeking to build up, enrich, and make better.
Why did you decide to write this book now? You've been around for a while. You've been making noise for a while. You've had millions.
Of course, and then Stephen A. Smith is just going to like just play with his balls right here. Like, oh my God, you're just so popular and you're just so brave. And why are you writing a book? You're just so amazing. Like, bro, shut up, man.
It's a sort of kind of broad idea, and then I sit down, I think about it, I research it, and then I sort of write it in a concerted period of time. This one was actually written over the course of the last 2 years or so. The inception point was right at the beginning of the book. It was November of 2023. It was about a month and a half after the October 7th attacks in Israel, the terrorist attacks by Hamas against Jews in the Gaza envelope. And I was supposed to debate at Oxford University. So I fly over to Britain,
right,
and my security team tells me I'm not allowed to stay in London, too insecure. Real security problems in London. The weekend before, 300,000 people had been out marching in favor of Hamas against Israel and all the rest. So I'm staying about an hour outside of London. Then I go over to University of Oxford, one of the great historic educational institutions
right,
of the West, 1,000 years old. And there, too, there are serious security risks. People shouting anti-Western, anti-American, anti-Israel, some anti-Semitic slogans. And I thought to myself, something that is quite scary is happening. Right
now, if he was a normal human being, and like I told you, I'm going to be nitpicky, okay? And Noble, I see that super chat. I appreciate you. I will address that after the segment. But once again, I see you and I appreciate you. But a normal human being would be like, okay, I see all this happening. Let me reflect on what is going on. Okay, it's a reason why millions of people across the world are feeling some sort of way against Israel. Okay, like a normal person would do that. But of course not Ben Shapiro. Of course not. Listen to this.
And I thought to myself, something that is quite scary is happening. Right, something is very, very wrong. And what is it that's driving all these people together? Because one of the things that you saw was weird agglomerations of people. It wasn't just people who were interested in the Middle East, which you would get. Right. It was for example, Queers for Palestine. It was people who had no interest in a Palestinian state in Gaza. It was people who, if there were a Palestinian state in Gaza, would be thrown off the rooftops in Gaza. So why were they marching also? Well, what do all these?
Why were they marching?
People have in common? And the answer is very little, except a desire to tear down the Western system.
Okay, so why are all these people together? Like, you have Queers for Palestine, Black folks for Palestine, which, if you don't know, historically, the Black Panther Party of Self-Defense were also for Palestinian people. So, I mean, just to give you a little historical context, okay? But once again, he's asking himself, why are all these people gathering around this? And it's simple. Like I told you, I done read, 4 or 5 books on the history of the Middle East and, the ins and outs and why people are feeling such a way and in the root cause, in my opinion, of this situation. You don't even have to do all that. All you got to do is turn on the news, read some data. If you understand that over, in some estimates, 80,000 people have been killed within a year and a half, you would already know that is not right. You don't have to be a Middle East scholar to understand that. Ben, like, it's called being a human. Hey, I don't think you should be shooting little kids in the face. Snipers shooting kids in the face. That's not right. Shooting down people while they're trying to get aid and food, waiting in line, that's not right. Starving over 500,000 people, that's not right. So it doesn't matter if you're gay, straight, black, white, live in America, live in China. It doesn't matter. When you see the situation, you say, hey, I don't think a country should be treating people like that. That's pretty simple, Ben. Well, you know, what interest do they have? Well, it's called the internet, okay? But man, all right, let's continue.
People have in common? And the answer is very little, except a desire to tear down the Western system, the idea that the systems themselves are to blame for their problems. And so they put aside their own issues with each other to march together. And that coalition is the thing that frightens me and concerns me.
And that right there, I think, is the most honest, truthful, most respected thing I've heard him say my entire time watching him. People putting away their small differences and coming together to tear down structural systems, institutions that were made and maintained today to exploit people like you and me. That frightens him. He is scared that we're not, hey, I don't care if you white, I don't care if you black, I don't care if you gay, I don't care if you trans, I don't care if you're an immigrant. None of that. These people are exploiting us and they're destroying our communities. Now we know who the enemy is. And guess what? Ben is right. The most honest thing he done said is that he's afraid of that. And you know what? If you find yourself being afraid because people are uniting, well, maybe you should be. I'm just saying, maybe there's a reason why you're afraid. I'm just saying.
You of the belief that Western civilization doesn't need to be torn down?
Yes.
Okay.
Western civilization needs to be upheld and strengthened.
And define Western civilization according to Ben Shapiro.
Sure. So Western civilization, I have a whole book a few years back called The Right Side of History, where I sort of trace the evolution of Western civilization. Basically, the classical definition of Western civilization is the tension between Jerusalem and Athens. Jerusalem being biblical values, like Judeo-Christian values, and Athens being Greek reason. The idea that there's a tension between the two, and that in that interplay, you end up with things like the Renaissance, you end up with the Enlightenment, you end up with the outcome being balance of power in government and free speech and private property and free markets. And all of that is the evolutionary outgrowth of a certain level of biblical values, right? Traditional values, biblical living, combined with the application of reason to the world and to those values. And so that creates this kind of almost magical concoction that has its dark places. I mean, the history of Western civilization is not uncheckered, right. but leads to the great prosperity and freedom that we have today.
But when you talk about the great prosperity and the freedom that we have today, when you think about Western civilization, although that's a clear component of it and it comes associated with it, a lot of the chaos, a lot of the problems that we seem to be having in this world, a lot of people would look at Western civilization as being an instigator of such things because, you know, it's not as if the rules are always applicable. Sometimes we look at things and we have this mentality that anything goes, and we allow us as a society to get away with things that in other places of the world where a bit more rigidity kicks in, that would not happen. What do you say to people that would make that argument when they think about Western civilization?
There's always legitimate grievances against any system. The question is whether the system as a whole is good and ought to be upheld, or whether it ought to be torn down to the ground. And I think that one of the key things to remember when it comes to the international order is that every agent is a motivated agent. I think that there's a tendency when we think about the world, particularly as members of the West, as Americans, we tend to think everybody's reacting to us. If somebody does something abroad, it's because of something America did. America did something, they're reacting to us. That's not actually the way that the world works. It turns out that there are many different cultures and many different peoples with their own interests. And so what you really have to ask is not why bad things happen all across the world. Bad things have been happening all across the world since the foundation of the world. The real question is why anything good happens. Right? The natural state of man.
Okay, once again, I'm so glad that he has this simplistic view of America in their footprint on just about every country, every major country. Like, I mean, yeah, America has some, done some shady things, but I mean, let's talk about the good things. The reason why good things happen. A lot of these countries do not like us, okay, for legitimate reasons. And it's not because, like, we said something bad about their mama or something. Here's two things that I just found just real quick. In Iran, 1953, the CIA helped overthrow Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh after nationalizing Iranian oil, restoring the Shah to power. Once again, I learned about this a few months ago. Okay, once again, I don't know everything. I'm trying to get myself put on game. America, literally, with the help of Britain, played these people. And now we wonder why these people say death to America. We're so confused, like, oh, why are they so mad at us? We screwed up their prosperity. I think they were one of the top three countries when it comes to resources in oil. Like, this was going to make them profitable. This was going to make them a rich and wealthy country. And we played them. Long story short, we played them. Kind of crazy, right? So it's not just a little thing you could just brush off, be like, we got to talk about that? You can't just sweep like things like that under the rug, Ben. That's not how history works. Every action has a reaction. But no, he's just like, nah, I mean, we can forget that, but let's talk about why good things happen. Okay, Ben, got you.
The foundation of the world. The real question is why anything good happens, right? The natural state of man is actually poverty. I mean, that was the state of mankind in about 1800. And then the Enlightenment happened, and private property and free markets. And suddenly you see an explosion in wealth that ends up crossing borders to the point where life expectancy jumps from the 30s to the 80s in westernized countries, and jumps by decades even in non-completely westernized countries. And so, listen, everything is a mixed bag. That's just the nature of the world. But overall, Western civilization has been the greatest boon to mankind in the history of all civilization.
But you know this, and because of who you are and what you bring to the table. I mean, you understand when you're significant, when you have cachet. In the case of America, you're the superpower. You make up about 5% of the population and use about 25% of the world's resources. Some people say, I don't know how accurate that number is. Please don't hold me to that, because I don't know. I just know that I've heard that on many, many occasions. People use that as an example. And to the victor goes the spoils, they say. So you look at a place like America, it's a superpower. We're supposed to be the richest country in the world, and it's perceived as being at the expense of so many other nations.
Right, and this is the problem. I don't think that's true.
Okay.
On a fundamental level, I do not think that is true.
Okay.
The United States is not rich because we have impoverished other nations. That is a zero-sum view of the world. People tend to apply it to domestic economics also. They'll say that Bill Gates is rich because some guy is poor.
And I'm not saying it is. I'm saying people say that, but I don't know.
No. And that's the argument that I'm fighting against, because what that leads to is a desire to tear down people who are successful by...
All right, once again, Ben, we understand many things can happen at once. And now when he's trying to conflate a nation and this a single person like Bill Gates, those are two different things. Okay, United States, once again, they built their wealth off of free labor. There's no if, ands, or buts about it. You can look at any data metric in U.S. history when it comes to the free labor and the type of resources that were being collected. That's what made America the start of a superpower. It wasn't just everyone locking in unison and just working hard together. No, this was over 200 years of free labor. What was it? Sugar, cotton, coffee, some other resource. I forget right now. But that's what made America. That's what put America on the map. So you want to sit here and act like that didn't happen, and that didn't play a major foundation for America? Obviously not, because you probably lose your job if you admit that.
Blaming them for your lack of success. Right? If you go back to, again, those biblical values that I was talking about, one of the first stories in the book of Genesis, and maybe the most important, is the Cain and Abel story. And the Cain and Abel story, which I think is sort of the key story for all of humanity, really, in describing human nature, is Cain and Abel. Cain decides, let's bring sacrifices to God. And so he and his brother Abel, they bring sacrifices to God, and Abel's is accepted and Cain's is rejected. And at this point, God turns to Cain and he gives him a kind of pick-me-up speech. He says, listen, your sacrifice was not accepted. You have two choices. Sin crouches at your door. You can either choose to overcome it or you can succumb to your sin. You look inside, see if there's something you could do better, or you can blame your brother and you can kill your brother. And of course, Cain goes the wrong way, kills his brother, and ends up exiled. So I think that is the real question for all of us, right? Are the problems that we see in our own life things that are solvable? One of the most enervating things that we see.
All right, before he continues with whatever this babbling here, first off, two things, once again, can be true at once. And I've said this plenty of times, and other people who are intellectually honest will tell you the same thing. Yes, there's some decisions that you can make that will benefit your life, like getting up, going to work. That's the easiest thing that people can do. I did it myself this morning. Got up, brushed my teeth, washed my behind, got to work. That's simple. But of course, there's things that are not in our control, which is, the C word that people don't like to really discuss, which is capitalism. Its major function is profit. And to squeeze out as much profit as it can is going to exploit somebody. And trust me, I haven't seen it exploit a CEO. I haven't seen it exploit shareholders. None of that. Who's it going to exploit? Us. Me and you watching. So once again, that's something that's out of my control. And once again, I can't just quit and go to another job because that same job is functioning under the same system. Pay me as little as possible and work me as much as possible. That's why people are working 50, 60 hours a week and barely make it. You see what I'm saying? So once again, Ben, what are you talking about? And since you want to talk biblical stuff, once again, I was a youth pastor once upon a time, a lot less angrier. But let's talk about some Bible, because once again, you can always find some sort of verse and cherry pick it to support your argument. But if that's what you want to do, I can do it too. So in Ephesians 4:12 or 4:22 through 24, it says, put off your old self and put on the new self. Once again, that's describing you have to tear down your old self to build something new. You can't build upon your old self. That's not going to work. Once again, tear down your old self in order to build something new. We have 2 Corinthians 5:17. If anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. The old has gone, the new is here. Once again, you're talking about upholding old systems because they work for you. Well, in here, hey, sometimes you got to tear it all down in order for the new to come. I got one more for you because, hey, if you want to go this route, we can go this route. In Luke chapter 5, no one tears a piece out of new garment to patch an old one. Otherwise, they will have torn the new garment and put a patch from the new will not match the old. And no one pours new wine into old wineskins. Otherwise, the new wine will burst the skins. The wine will run out and the wineskins will be ruined. No, new wine must be poured into new wineskins. I'm saying, if you want a new system that benefits the workers, it uplifts 90% of Americans who clock in and clock out every single day, you can't build that upon the old system. Capitalism, it is not going to work. It's like mixing water and wine. It's not going to work. I'm sorry. It's called science. You see what I'm saying? So sometimes we have to tear it down. But no, people like Ben Shapiro, he benefits off of that. So of course, why would he want to tear something down that he benefits from himself?
see in the West, and I think all over the world, is this belief system like, no matter what I do, I can't get ahead. No matter what I do, my problems are insoluble. It must be somebody else's fault. Now, in some cases, it is somebody else's fault. Of course. And in those cases, what I would hope is that we can provide evidence of why this person is harming you, how they're harming, and then we can all fight it together. I've said that.
We can all fight it together. Look at the numbers. 1% of Americans own over 60% of the wealth in America. What more data do you need? The math ain't mathin'. 1% of Americans own more than 60% of Americans' wealth. Doesn't make any sense. How are we not able to afford what our grandparents were able to afford back in the 40s, back in the 50s? The math ain't mathin', Ben. What more do you need? But of course, you got to throw in a bone for people like Stephen A. Smith. Like, yeah, I mean, if there is a problem, we'll fight it together. Ben, it's been a problem. That's why people are not happy. But of course, he's not trying to have a genuine conversation.
If that's the case, why in the book do you say that the differences and the biggest reason for the divide in this country is not necessarily about red and blue, but it's about envy? Why do you say that?
Because, again, I think that this is not about red and blue at all. I think you see, again, a lot of grievance politics in the United States where people will say, just to take an example, Luigi Mangione, right,
yes,
allegedly shoots the United Healthcare CEO on the streets of New York. And a bunch of people say, well, you know, he deserved it because he was the United Healthcare CEO, and I don't like how the health insurance system runs, and therefore murder is okay. And I was like, well, no, if you don't like the system of healthcare, then we can have a discussion about how to change that. But the idea that cold-blooded murder is justified because you have a grievance against the healthcare system. Now you're talking about tearing down the entire system of law because you have a grievance with the healthcare system. The idea that we...
Okay, first off, Ben, no one is saying, oh, murder is justifiable. Once again, you're finding the most craziest, weirdest people on TikTok to support your argument. What we're saying is people are getting so frustrated, they're willing to go to this extreme. And we're done having these conversations. This is not the first time we had a conversation about our healthcare system. So we're done with the conversation. Some people are beyond done with the conversation, as we've seen. So Ben, once again, you're like decades late here. So I'm sorry, you're kind of wrong.
System of law because you have a grievance with the healthcare system. The idea that we see in, I think, this New York mayoral race, which is that there's an affordability problem. The reason there's an affordability problem is because rich people exist. Billionaires should stop existing. If we just didn't have rich people, or if we somehow punish rich people, somehow this would make poor people richer. Whenever people talk about income inequality, I always start to curdle a little bit because the reality is the problem is not income inequality. The problem is poor people need to be richer. Okay, the entire premise of the idea of income inequality is that rich people are rich because they're stealing from poor people. That's false. That's not true. Bill Gates did not get rich by stealing from poor people. Jeff Bezos did not get rich by stealing from poor people. That is not how you get rich. Okay. Unless you're living in a hunter-gatherer society, in which case your wealth is very much limited to how many berries and deer limbs are in your society. The way that people get rich is by innovating, risk-taking, creating better goods and services, but a politics that says your problems, your upset at the world is not your own fault. It's the fault of the free market. It's the fault of private property. It's the fault of that billionaire over there. Let's go and tear him down. That is a very, very dangerous policy.
But I use the word.
All right, now we're going to have a real honest moment here, okay? We're going to have a real honest moment. People are envious. Ben is right. We are envious, but not in the way of they have something that I want type of envious. More of I've watched my grandfather work week in, week out, living check to check, now old as hell, doesn't have anything to show for it. Watch my parents, watch my aunt do the same thing. Work day in, day out, living paycheck by paycheck, putting in 50, 60, 70 hours a week and still barely making it, and now reaching the age to where they really have nothing to show for it. I don't want to follow that. So I'm not envious of they have something that I want. I'm envious because I have been working. My family has been working hard and we barely can make it, but we live in a system that is facilitating all the wealth concentrated on a few people because they're greedy. While we're over here literally slaving over here for breadcrumbs, barely making it. For what? To put more money into their pocket? So yes, we are envious because we are working harder than any CEO, than any billionaire. You created something, but who's in those warehouses creating it for you? That simple. So once again, like, having this mindset of people are just envious because they want to be rich. No, people are just tired of working week in and week out, working their fingers to the bone for breadcrumbs. Why we have people like Elon Musk getting government subsidies to put towards new businesses while actively cutting Medicaid and Medicare from those same people. How does that work? I don't know. You see how crazy that is? So once again, Ben, you're right. And you should be afraid because at some point people are going to get tired of sitting here asking for more while actively getting everything sucked from us. It's not going to work.
Pick myself up, moving on to the better. Hey. Ain't no errors, baby, it's a new era. I wake up early, feeling rich like I'm Kesha. I get to the paper, boy. Extra, extra.